Hi everybody, today we're going to look at an endgame from Vishy Anand and Hikaru Nakamura that has an important intermediate position to the queen versus rook endgame. So you can see we're quite a ways away from it. One of the attacker's standard plans is to sacrifice material in order to queen a pawn when the opponent only has a rook. So in this position, white's advantage is the passed pawn. It's not enough to win with, but the first task is to get the king into the game. Okay, bring the king forward. Hikaru attacks the rook pawn. Not a bad thing to do. It's still positionally a draw. So advance the pawn, come over here, still a draw. Pawn comes forward, still a draw. We go here, take the rook. Cuts off the rook so that it can't get behind the passed pawn. This is the first critical position. Here's where Nakamura makes a game-losing mistake. The right thing to do here is to go here. And the reason is, if you take with the knight, obviously the rook plays b5 and the passed pawn is lost and it's just a draw. But what if you take with the king? Well, the difference in playing knight d3 versus what Nakamura did is that now this pawn capture comes with check and the rook is back in the game. If the king steps back to cover the b3 square, well, you have another route in, so pawn advances, go there, knight check, king moves up, queen the pawn, exchange the pieces, last pawn is gone, game is a dead draw. Instead, Nakamura played here, and now the game's a loss. We're going to sacrifice material in order to queen our pawn. There's the pawn queening, and now we have a rook versus queen with pawns on the board. Get the pawn off the board. Now black has a passed pawn. The e5 pawn is covered by the queen currently, but it really can't be held. Activate that pawn. Now check here, drop that pawn, come over here, and black is going to sensibly just let that rook pawn go in order to set up a strong defensive position. So there goes the pawn. Bring your pieces back together, can't be bad. King walks forward over here, and now Vishy makes a serious mistake. He goes here instead of going here. And the difference is black being able to gain a tempo. If you play the right move, king e4, well, you want to give your rook mobility. The difference is that now white has time to play queen e7, which prevents the black king from falling back to the e8 square and setting up what's an improved third-rank defense. So in this position, well, you have to protect the pawn. Otherwise, it's just our old friend. So we check here, go back here, bring the king forward, try protecting that pawn any longer. Okay, let's go over here, queen e7 check. Pawn is lost. There's no way to defend it anymore. Or if we go back here, h6 check, check here, down there, check here, there. And now the king is going to circle around and just create threats. Okay, if you move the pawn, it's obviously lost. If you try to continue holding the pawn, now you see what's happening. The king and queen are cooperating to create threats against the defender's king, and sooner or later, you either lose the pawn or you have to back yourself into a fatal cage. Okay, so that's what happens if you don't give black the extra tempo right here. But Anand played this, which gives Nakamura the chance to play here. And now with the extra tempo, because the rook is covered, the king can fall back. And Nakamura actually doesn't play the best move here. The best move, that's what he played. The best move is to fall back to e8. And what you see is that white's problem is that the king is cut off. There's no way for king and queen to cooperate in creating threats against the black king. The rook is cutting off on the fourth rank instead of the third rank. It's supported by the pawn and can check from d5 or f5. The king can shuttle between d8 and e8 all at once. and when necessary, step forward onto the 7th rank to support the pawn. So white's problem is how to break down this nice piece coordination from black, and just as with the 3rd rank defense, the attacker is going to have to play at least one non-intuitive move in order to break this down. So let's start looking at it, but before we do that, there's something else we have to look at to begin preparing to see the critical attacking maneuver. Okay, in order to start building intuition for how to play this endgame, we need to look at a concept from pawn endings that you may have seen before. So black to move, guards the pawn, and white has to do a steady encircling maneuver like this in order to force the black king to give up access to the pawns, and now the game is lost. Okay, remember that concept and watch the same thing happen in our endgame. Okay, so we're back here at our ideal defensive position for black. So let's go ahead and just start attacking, step forward. We do have to get our king over to the left sooner or later, so we may as well start now. Okay, give that check, step aside, go back to your other supported square. This queen check is good. It gives the queen maximum freedom with the long diagonal as well as the rank and file. And now this is the point at which you have to do one of two non-intuitive moves. One of them is king b4. The other one, the one we'll start with, is queen b2. Now all the attacker's doing is encircling to attack from the left. And let's have black go ahead and let that happen so we can see the strategy unfolding. Okay, we give the check there, step back, give the check there, got to defend the pawn, step forward, fall back, attack the pawn, got to defend the pawn, give the check there, and go there. Do you see the similarity to the strategy? Instead of the king doing the encircling maneuver, it's the queen. Unlike the pure queen versus rook endgame, we're actually trying to force black's pieces into the center of the board, because now that there are 3 instead of 2, they will actually start getting in each other's way, and they're going to find it very hard to protect that pawn. Okay, so let's go here, give that check, step forward, and your move, black. Well, how do you save the pawn? You pretty much go there. Give step over there. Okay, your move. How do you keep protecting all your pieces? Okay, let's go there. Attack the pawn. Your move. See how the pieces are getting into a steadily more and more awkward position? Okay, your move. Okay, let's go there. And now we step over here. Your move. How do you keep holding on to everything? Well, that's about the only way to do it. And now we give that check, and I double dare you to play king e5. That would be an immediate mate, so we have to go over here. All right, step up here, attack the pawn. How are you going to save it? Well, step there. Check there. Again, you can't play king e5. It's an immediate mate. The queen has crept 1 square closer, so the king has to step aside and the pawn is lost. Okay, that's the basic way that white is going to try to win the game, and black is going to try to prevent that. So let's go back to this position, and let's look at what happens if black tries to prevent that encircling from the left. Okay, so he brings the rook to the other safe square. Well, now what you do is bring your queen back to where it was, attacking the pawn. Got to support the pawn, bring the king up, give the check. King up there, queen there. See the similarity? It's the same process. By going queen b2 and still being able to come back to f6, the queen can do this attack from whichever side the rook isn't on, so the rook can't get in the way. Okay, so get a check there. Obviously, I mean, I could walk all the way over to g4, but I'm wasting moves. Why do that? And now the rook goes to its other safe square. Give this check. Attack the pawn, and now if black plays that move to protect the pawn, that's actually a substantial concession, because not because of queen d7 check, which would fit our template, although that works fairly well, but because of queen c5 check. And now attack the pawn, and you've seen this position before. King walks in, and again it's getting very difficult to sustain that pawn, and you pretty much have no concept of a cutoff defense any longer. Okay, king comes over there, give that check. King steps aside, and now you can walk in with your king. The checks are over. Rook back here, check there, and the pawn is lost. Okay, so let's go back here, and again let's play queen b2, and let's have black not just let things unfold, because actually there's a better way to defend at a key point. Now you know the process. We come here attacking the pawn, and we do our walk around maneuver. We check there, and we attack the pawn, and now this is the point where black has a better option. Instead of playing king d5 and getting bollocksed up in the center, resume a cutoff defense. Now we're going to leave the pawn on e6 because that's actually where it's strongest. But now we're taking up a cutoff defense again, and now we bring the king over. We've sort of changed the idea of our cutoff defense. Now we're trying to maintain it in the center of the board. And white has some very difficult maneuvering with checking squares to do here in order to break this down. So of course this is the obvious check. Keep contact with the pawn, force the king over here. Now skewer the rook, force him over there. King over here. Okay. Now, the thing to do as the defender that will give the attacker fits is maintain that cutoff along the fourth rank. This way. Don't budge that pawn yet. Okay, so we check here so as to take away the checking square on a3. King falls back. King over here. Maintain that cutoff. Go to the opposite side. Okay, we're going to go here, and as you see, we're trying to break down that pesky cutoff. So there's a fork from c3, there's a fork from g3, so that leaves only one safe square to maintain the cutoff. Okay, we go down to c2, and again, we're maintaining forking squares so that there's only one safe square to maintain the cutoff. So we go here, we're maintaining forking and skewering squares, and there's only one safe square to maintain the cutoff. What I want you to see here is, like in the main queen versus rook endgame, the attacker has to play some very difficult calculations to break down this kind of cutoff with that extra pawn on the board. Okay, so we check there, and again we're holding on to some forking squares because we're on the orbit of the rook. So back here, and again we're staying on the orbit of the rook. So back here, okay, attack the rook, and now the king can step forward anywhere. The cutoff is finally broken. As is often the case in this endgame, it's better to walk forward on a diagonal. For example, if we go to e4 instead, over here to h4, and we've given black some additional options of checking from the far side. So we bring our queen over. See, we're having to do some kinds of shenanigans like in the harassment defense. And please note that now the attacker can post his rook on the diagonal of the pawn, and it's a different kind of harassment defense. You can't fork the rook. Okay, so better to go to king f4. And that way, if the rook swings over to the other side, any check is going to be met by g5, so it's easier to break this down. Let's just go ahead and attack the pawn. And at this point, black just doesn't have a good way to save the game, or to save the pawn at least. The best thing to do here is to bring the rook back, and now you just take the pawn, and we're in a plain old queen versus rook endgame. So as you can see, this process of encircling is something that black can really defend well against. Not that way. I got screwed up. Following our usual procedure, give that check, go to your other safe square, and now play for a cutoff another file farther down, and it actually turns into something very difficult for the attacker to break down. About the time you get here, Again, that's not the way to play. There we go. It's very difficult to break this cutoff defense. There's just about always one safe square for the rook to go to until you can circle around like this, and only now does he have to give up the cutoff defense, and your king starts to penetrate over this way, and he finally has to give it up or he's going to lose big time. Okay, and finally, let's go back here and take a look at the other attacker's other non-intuitive move, king b4. Essentially, this is a pass. Okay, so I can pass moves too. So now the queen attacks the pawn, king defends the pawn, and you've seen this maneuver before. Rook goes to its other safe square, give the check there, attack the pawn, king up there, and you've seen this before. Here's our maneuver again. That's the piece that can protect the pawn. King steps in. This is looking very familiar, right? And now we attack the rook. The rook can try to maintain a cutoff here. And again, you're playing it to prevent checks. Grab that checking square on d1. Go over there. Now we've got a kind of a harassment defense here. The defender has a lot of options in this. It's very difficult to break down. So we go over here, go to a safe square there, king over there, attack the pawn, check there, lose the pawn. If you go there, that's fatal. So again, the attacker can get at that pawn, but just look at all the difficult maneuvering that has to go on from this position if he sets up on this line. Okay, got to control the checking square, semi-harassment kind of defense. Over here again, I can go there because the checking square is guarded and the pawn is going to be lost. It's really easy for the attacker to go astray here. And if we back up here, your other option is to give that check there, step across, and we've seen this before. Here we go, queen check there, and the pawn is lost.